Hey guys, thanks for checking out my video. Today I'm going to show you how to turn this into this. So before we get started, I should mention the only fancy tool you're going to need for this is one of these jigsaws or scroll saws, whatever you call it. If you don't have one, they're pretty cheap. This one was like 50 bucks, but you can get them at Walmart or Home Depot for around 20 or 25 bucks if you don't have one. If you're not planning on getting one, I have some other ideas for you as well, but we'll get to that. All right, so the first thing we want to do is figure out how we want to orient our board. I like the grain going horizontally like this. We're also going to split it into quadrants. It's a 4x4 sheet. It's technically just under 4 feet, like maybe a 1/16 of an inch shorter, going both ways, but it's close enough. And so we're going to mark it off 2 feet in this way and 2 feet in the other way, and we're just going to make a crosshairs. We're going to start up here in the corner with the scroll work at the top. I don't know if you can see this very well, but you can see in the original sign, this is a screen grab from the movie. It kind of comes in, goes up at a 90-degree angle, and then comes in again and loops around. It makes this little curve at the top. So we're going to try to replicate that as best we can. I just grabbed this piece of paper here. We're going to use that to make a template. So we're going to line it up with the corners. And I made this 2 feet long so it matches right with the center of the sign. And we're going to come down about 9 inches. Okay, I just taped this down off camera so it wouldn't blow away on me. But I did measure down 9 inches. That's just what I thought looked right. I don't know if that's screen accurate, but it looked right to me. Then I measured in 3.5 inches, and then up at a 90-degree angle, 2 inches. 2 inches. So now we need to make this curve where it comes in and then loops in on itself and then swings down. So we're just going to kind of sketch that in, trying to make it look right. So we come in, we're going to start curving up. We're not going to go all the way to the top of the board. I'm going to say we're going to stop maybe, I don't know, 1/2 inch shy of the top. And then come almost to the center, loop down like that, and then stop and swing it back out like this. Okay? So that's our template. What we're going to do is cut that out, trace it on, and then just flip it over and trace it on the other side. All right, I cut this out. I did make a few adjustments off camera. I felt like I made this loop come down too far. I don't know if you can see where the original mark is, so I brought it up maybe like 1.5 inches. So you can do that, just figure out where exactly you want it. But I would say this was maybe like 7 inches down. I wanted it closer to 5 inches down. So now we're going to go ahead and line that up back to where it was. This was about 1/2 inch from the top of the wood. Trace that in. This line, I know earlier I said to make all your lines light. This you're going to cut on, so it doesn't matter if this line's heavy. Flip it over. All right, and if you did everything right, where it ends on the other side of this sign, it should also be 9 inches down, like where we started over here. So you can double check your measurements. Go ahead and check that with the ruler. All right, so now at the bottom of our sign, we're doing pretty much the same thing we did at the top, but the scroll work down here looks different. First, we're going to measure 34 inches down from where our last cut-in was. So the outside edge of the sign is going to be 34 inches long. I just came up with that number. I don't know if it's screen accurate. It just kind of looked right to me. So I'm coming 34 inches down, which is right about here. And then just like at the top, I'm going to measure in 3.5 inches. And then 2 inches down from there. Right about here. And then we're going to draw our curve. So imagine that this line where we bumped it in is continuing along. When you come up with this part of the curve, you don't want to cross over that line. So I'll just draw it in there. So you don't want to come up over it like that. You want to stay beneath it. And then start to curve back down towards the bottom. And then when you come back up where it points in the middle, you similarly do not want to come up above that line. So I'm coming in, curving back down, and then up to a point in the center. So where it comes up to a point here and where it goes up here, those both points are below this line. So now we're just gonna cut this out, trace it, flip it over, trace the other side just like we did on the top. All right, so I did go ahead and outline it in Blackmagic marker so you guys can see it a little bit better, but now you can see the shape of our sign. I recommend formatting your sign, like putting in where all the letters are gonna go before you start cutting, because it's easier to make measurements from a square sheet. Like for instance, up here, we're gonna have the curved welcome to, and it's gonna be easier to figure out where we wanna orient everything if we can measure from, like, say, a flat corner down rather than trying to measure from a curve. Same with on the other side. You just want to go for symmetry, and it's going to be a lot easier to do that if we're working with a square piece. All right, we're going to get a little more complicated here with our sign. We're going to draw in the lines for where we want it to say welcome to. So what I'm using is a piece of string. I have it tied down to my other end of the table just to anchor it in place. I have a loop up at the top here that I can stick my pencil in. I want the top of my line to be about 2.5 inches, I want to say, from the bottom of this curved piece. So I think where we have it's pretty good. This piece of string, to get the curve you want, I used it, it's like 46 inches, I think. That's from the tip of this loop down to where it's anchored on my table. And so I'm just gonna put my pencil in there. I'm gonna trace this line in. Okay, same over here. Nice and light, remember, because we are going to erase this. And now for my next line, you can't just move the sign up 3 inches. You have to make the string 3 inches shorter, or I think I'm actually going to do probably 3.5, 4 inches, something like that. But yeah, if you just pull your sign up to change the orientation of the string, these lines aren't going to remain parallel. They're going to start to meet at the bottom. So I'm just going to take a few inches out of this string, and I'm going to draw in my bottom line. All right, so you see I have my lines done in here. You can also see where I messed up some lines, but these are good. These are parallel the whole way. And I don't know if this is going to be the actual, I might make my letters a little bit bigger than this, but that's okay, because as long as I have these lines as reference, I just know I want, the top of my letter to maybe stick out a half inch, or the bottom of my letter to stick out below an inch. These are just reference points for you for when you start laying in your letters. So we're going to put in where we're going to do the Camp Crystal Lake. This is going to be Crystal Lake here. Camp is going to be up here in the middle somewhere. I want these letters to be 5 inches tall. So I'm going to measure down from the top corner of my wood here, 20.5 inches. That's going to be my top line. And since they're 5 inches tall, we're going to measure down here to 25.5 inches. You can also put one in the middle. That can be helpful too. So you're going to measure up 2.5 inches, which will put you at 23. And now I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. I'm also going to do it in the middle here, because as I mentioned, I'm using a yardstick, which is going to span the whole length. So we're going to come in over here, mark it in, and then I'll do the same over here, and I'll trace those lines. All right, I got those lines put in, and now I'm going to put in lines for the camp part. I'm only going to put about a 1/2 inch gap between the Crystal Lake and the camp. So we can just pencil that in real quick. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to measure up, say 2.5 inches for the middle, and then 5 inches for the top. And we'll trace those in. So we're going to start laying in where we want the letters to go. I picked 3 3/16 inches for how wide my letters are going to be. So go ahead and measure. You need 12 spaces for Crystal Lake. That includes a gap in between Crystal and Lake. So you need 6 on this side and 6 on this side. I'm going to go ahead and lay those in. I just made a little mark on my ruler where 3 3/16 inches is. So I mark it, move it down. If you can do the math in your head, go ahead. You could do 6 1/16 inches and so forth. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to lay them in one by one. I'm going to mark it on the bottom line and on the top line so I can make a little box for each of my letters. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to do the same up here with camp. So I need 4 letters up here, 2 on this side, 2 on this side. So you can see I have all my boxes in here. I also went ahead and added boxes up here for the welcome to part. I used the same measurement, 3 3/16 inches for my space. I decided to make these 4 inches tall. These parallel lines I drew in weren't quite 4 inches apart, so when I ran my line up, I just went up 4 inches instead of the 3.5 or whatever that was. So the last thing we need to do to format it is add in our ellipse down here at the bottom. That's where the landscape's going to go, and I'll show you guys how to do that. All right, so we're ready to do the ellipse. You need to decide where exactly you want it to be. I want the top of my ellipse to be about an inch, 1.5 below where it says Crystal Lake. And then I want the widest part of my ellipse to be kind of right in between the C and the R on this side, and then between the K and the E on this side. So I drew a line straight down from there. I measured down 10 inches and then in 2 inches. I did that on both sides. And now you see I tacked these nails in here. These are going to be like our focal points for the ellipse. Now, you can use like thumbtacks. You don't need to use nails. You just want to make sure you use something small. I use real tiny nails. That way you aren't going to have a big hole to fill when you're done. So what you're going to do is take a piece of string, wrap it around the two nails, and cross it over where you want the top of your ellipse to be. So right there. So that's where you're going to tie the knot in your string. I have already done that with another piece of string. Okay. So then you're just going to stick your pencil right up there, okay, and just move it along the string like so. And see, I'm coming out a little bit wider than what I wanted it to be, only by like a ½ inch though, and that's fine. I can live with that. And then it's not going to go all the way down to the bottom. It kind of cuts off before the bottom of the ellipse. So then just go ahead and come back up here. Do the same thing on the other side. Just push against the string. You're keeping it tight. Sometimes your pencil tip gets stuck in the string. That's all right. There we go. Okay. So that's our ellipse. Looks pretty good. Now I think we are ready to cut the sign out. So we're ready to cut. When you're doing this, you want to make sure your table underneath is not going to get hit by the saw blade as you're coming in. So I've moved this far enough away from the edge of my work table that it's not going to chop into it. I'm going to do a straight cut here, and then a straight cut here, and then I can cut that piece afterwards. When you're coming up along the curve here, don't force your blade. This is a thin blade. I broke 2 of these cutting out my first sign. So really take your time along the curves, and if you can't get it to go around a bend, just cut straight and then come back in at a shallower angle and shallower angle until you get the curve you're looking for. See over here, the blade was starting to fight me a little bit, so rather than trying to curve back in, I just chopped it straight off, and now I'll come in this way. I'm going to do that the whole way around. When you get to this part in here, you could drill a hole here and here, so that way when you come in, you could just then turn your blade and go back this way, or you can just chop it out in little pieces, whatever works better for you. I just wanted to show you guys real quick what I meant here about chopping straight and then coming back in. See, I came around here and I couldn't get my blade around this curve, so what I did is I came straight and then straight down here to cut this chunk out, and that way I could then come at it from this angle and get in. And then I got to about here. I'm probably going to have to come straight down here and maybe loop back around. You'll have to play with it a little bit, but you can get this out. Like I said earlier, you can always drill a hole here and here, and that way you can just turn your blade right at like a 90-degree angle. All right, so that's our sign all cut out. Looks really good. You can really see the shape of it now. You remember earlier in the beginning of the video, I said something about if you weren't planning on buying a saw, there were some other options. Obviously, you could just make your sign square. you know, that's up to you. If you're cool with a square sign, make a square one. No cutting involved. Another thing you could do is trace it out the way we did with the scroll work, and then just paint the negative space black and kind of create like an optical illusion. Or if you're planning on hanging it somewhere, like I'm hanging mine on my shed over there, you know, I could use the same color as the wall of the shed and paint the negative space that color. So that's a possibility if you're not into cutting. So anyway, now that it's all cut out, you definitely want to sand all these edges down. They're going to be pretty rough. So get like a sanding block and just go at it. Take your time with it, and make sure you kind of round off the edges here. If you try to paint an edge, if it's a real sharp, like 90-degree angle, the paint's not going to want to stick that well. So make that nice and smooth, round it off a little bit. All right, I've got my sign all sanded down, and we're ready to start putting our letters in. Here is a screenshot, a good screenshot of the actual sign from the original movie, and you can see the letters here. I don't think this is an actual font. I'm pretty sure the artist, whoever made it, just kind of came up with this, but it definitely seems to be based off of a Western type font. These little barbs in the middle of the letters, that's typical of like a Western font. So it looks a little complicated, but really all you're gonna do is make a block letter and then add the little flourishes in. So like right here, you see I started putting this L in, and I just did it a block letter. And you see I left some space because we left 3 3/16 inches for all of our letters, but that didn't include any space between the letters. So I kind of just leave a little bit of space when you start your letter. So anyway, I went ahead and I blocked that in, just a regular block letter, and we're going to just kind of, sorry, it's windy out here today, guys. We're just going to add these barbs, these little flourishes. And then up at the top, it has this sort of, I don't know, it's like a funny, I don't know how well you can see that. It's like a funny kind of S curve at the top, I guess you could say. So it kind of comes like this at the top. And then down at the bottom, comes out like this. And then it comes up like this here. And there you go. That's basically your letter. And that's how you're going to do all these. Just put them in there as a regular block letter, and then kind of add the flourishes where necessary. Up here where it says welcome to, those are just plain block letters. So just, those are real simple to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. I just wanted to point out what I did right here. The M, I felt like needed a little more room than the 3 3/16 inches that I gave it. So I kind of pushed it over into the box for the P, and then the P just ended up coming out a little bit. You could, if you wanted to reconfigure the whole thing to like shift it over and make sure it's still centered, you could obviously do that. But I'm okay with it coming out that much. I think it'll be fine. So that's, you can see what it's going to look like right here. I did take some liberties with the letters. I didn't make them exactly like they are in the picture here. Just things that I thought would look better if I did it a different way. I did that. Like if you look on real close on the L's, I don't even know if you can see it. My camera's probably not going to focus, but there's these extra little barbs in the L's that would go like right here and here, and I left those out. I didn't bother with it. So, you know, you can feel free to make it as screen accurate as you want or customize it to suit yourself as much as you want. So what I just did there is I went back in with the ruler and just gave some straighter edges to all the letters. I had just sketched them in real quick with pencil, and I just wanted to make them look neater before I started painting them. So now that we've got the lettering in, we've got our ellipse in place, we do need to do a border around the edge. Now, you could measure in, you know, an inch or whatever around the border, and, you know, draw your line with a straight edge. The problem is when you get down here to where you have a curve, that's going to be more difficult to do. So what I do is I just kind of use my finger to act as a guide along the curve, and I hold the pencil out the distance I want, and I just trace it all along like that. And I'm going to do this around the whole outside of the sign. Okay, so you see we got the border in. That's all the way around. It does not quite meet in the middle here. There is a little gap, so just leave that space empty. Also, I drew it coming straight up through here. It does not come straight through here. It actually comes and curves in and stops right about there. And then it picks back up here, comes out, and then meets back up there. But we'll worry about that when we get to the painting part. So before we paint, this part's a pain in the butt. You need to go over your sign and erase all the lines. So all of your guidelines, like this guy, you know, all these lines in here, you have to erase all that. The letters, obviously, you're going to leave. We are going to paint right on top of the letters. Don't worry, the work that we did will show through the paint, so that we'll know where to paint on top of that once the painting for the letters comes into play. So yeah, just take your time with this. Go through, erase everything. If you can't erase it, try hitting it with a piece of sandpaper. You can usually get it with that if you can't get it with the eraser.